How the Chiefs season fell apart in real time. Everyone keeps asking what went wrong with the Chiefs this season. Here's the uncomfortable answer. Nothing big went wrong. They were still in games, they still had the ball late, they still had Patrick Mahomes, but the endings kept changing. The plays they always made didn't hit. The breaks they always caught stopped coming. And slowly, the advantage they lived on for years just disappeared. This is how the Chiefs season fell apart in real time. Why close games stopped being a strength. To really understand how this season unraveled, you have to start with the one thing that defined the Chiefs' dominance for years: their ability to win close games. When the score was tight late, Kansas City didn't panic. They executed. They trusted Mahomes, they trusted their system, and, more often than not, they walked away with the win. That reputation wasn't built on luck. It came from experience, confidence, and an offense that could adjust on the fly. When defenses took something away, the Chiefs found something else. When a play broke down, Mahomes turned it into an advantage. Late game chaos almost felt familiar, even comfortable. This season, that feeling slowly disappeared. The Chiefs were still constantly in close games, but the outcomes flipped. Late drives stalled. Key third downs didn't convert. Field goals replaced touchdowns. Defensive stops didn't come when they were needed most. None of these moments felt dramatic on their own, but together they formed a pattern that became impossible to ignore. And once those moments start stacking, they don't just affect the scoreboard, they affect how the team feels. Close losses don't simply hurt the record, they linger. They add pressure to the next game, the next drive, the next third down. Suddenly, every mistake feels bigger because there's no cushion anymore. No sense that things will naturally swing back your way. The Chiefs weren't losing because they forgot how to win. They were losing because the margin they'd lived on for years finally turned against them. And once that happens, every game feels heavier than the last. The early warnings everyone dismissed. Looking back, the warning signs were there almost immediately, even if they didn't seem alarming at the time. Week 1 against the Chargers wasn't disastrous, but it felt off. Losing at home always raises eyebrows, but the bigger concern was how the game unfolded. The offense lacked rhythm, protection wasn't consistently clean, drives required more plays and more conversions just to stay alive. Still, it was easy to explain away. It was early, divisional games are unpredictable, plenty of time to fix things. Week 2 brought the same uneasy feeling. Another home loss, this time to the Eagles. The Chiefs were suddenly 0-2, and while no one was panicking, there was a quiet sense of vulnerability. The games felt harder than they should have, and the offense didn't look quite as free-flowing as it once did. Then, the Chiefs did what champions usually do. They responded. They stacked wins. They beat teams they were supposed to beat. At times, they even looked dominant, blowing out weaker opponents and reminding everyone why they were still considered contenders. That stretch mattered, but it also masked the real issue. Kansas City wasn't winning because they were overwhelming teams physically or schematically. They were winning because they were smarter, more experienced, and better coached. Those advantages help you survive, but they don't erase deeper structural problems. As the season progressed, it became clear the Chiefs weren't imposing their will anymore. They were reacting, adjusting, and surviving rather than dictating how games were played. When defenses stopped fearing them. By the middle of the season, defenses started approaching the Chiefs differently. Instead of treating Kansas City like an offense that needed to be contained at all costs, teams began treating them like an offense that could be managed. Defenders sat on routes instead of panicking. Linebackers attacked downhill rather than hesitating. Safeties trusted their reads. Kansas City's reliance on shotgun formations and spread concepts became easier to anticipate, especially without the same explosive punishment attached to it. That's where the offense started to feel constrained. Mahomes was still brilliant, but the puzzle he was solving every snap became tighter. Pressure didn't arrive in waves, but it came early enough to disrupt timing. Routes didn't have time to fully develop. Scramble drills became rushed rather than creative. For years, Mahomes had been the ultimate eraser. Protection breakdowns didn't matter because he could escape. Covered receivers didn't matter because he could buy time. This season, those escape routes started closing faster. Losses to teams like Buffalo and Denver weren't about talent gaps, they were about control. Those teams forced Kansas City into slower, more methodical football, where every play mattered and every mistake was punished. Once the Chiefs were living in that space, the margin for error vanished. The quiet damage no one talks about. Every struggling season has obvious talking points, but some of the most damaging issues the Chiefs faced barely showed up on highlight reels or post-game shows. Special teams quietly hurt them all year. Field position tilted the wrong way. Missed opportunities piled up. When games are decided by one possession, those hidden yards matter far more than most fans realize. Then there was age. Travis Kelce remained elite, but his dominance looked different. He picked his moments rather than overwhelming defenses every snap. His intelligence and timing were still invaluable, but the constant explosiveness wasn't there. Chris Jones was still disruptive, but not relentlessly so. He could still change games, just not single-handedly for 4 quarters every week. The Chiefs had built a roster that assumed their stars would erase mistakes. That works when those stars are playing at superhuman levels. When they're merely excellent, the flaws underneath become impossible to ignore. And hovering over everything was fatigue. Deep playoff runs year after year come with a cost. Extra games mean extra hits, extra recovery, and extra wear that doesn't disappear when a new season begins. Kansas City had essentially played an additional season compared to much of the league over the Mahomes era, and eventually that accumulation shows itself. When pressure took over. The loss to Houston was the point where everything that had been building all season finally surfaced at once. Until then, it was still possible to believe the Chiefs were one adjustment away from stabilizing, that a bounce or two could flip the narrative. This game made that belief much harder to defend. It wasn't simply the loss itself, but how it happened. Mahomes threw multiple interceptions, and none of them felt careless. They were forced throws, the kind that can happen when a quarterback no longer feels the offense can afford patience. When the structure around him stops producing clean answers, even someone as gifted as Mahomes starts trying to create solutions that aren't there. That shift mattered. For most of the Mahomes era, the Chiefs were built on trust and rhythm. If a drive stalled, there was confidence the next one would work. Against Houston, that calm disappeared. Every possession felt urgent, and urgency has a way of shrinking the field and narrowing decisions. The following week against the Chargers reinforced that fragility. Once again, the game was tight. Once again, Kansas City needed Mahomes to be exceptional just to stay alive. That burden had been creeping up all season, but here it was impossible to miss. Then came the moment that changed everything. Mahomes went down with a season-ending knee injury. Not because the injury caused the collapse, but because it removed the last layer of denial. For years, Mahomes had been the safety net that made flaws survivable. Without him, the truth was unavoidable. The Chiefs hadn't been one play away. They had been operating on borrowed time. Why this season hit different. Every great team eventually has a disappointing season, but not all down years feel the same. What made this one different wasn't just the record, but what it revealed about where the Chiefs actually are. This wasn't a team undone by a single flaw. It was a team that slowly ran out of margin. For years, Kansas City survived on experience, late-game execution, and the belief that they would find a way when it mattered most. This season, the league stopped giving them those edges. Defenses were more disciplined, mistakes were punished more consistently, and once that happened, the Chiefs were forced to be almost perfect just to stay competitive. That's an exhausting way to live over a full season, and the pressure showed up in small, cumulative ways rather than dramatic collapses. The uncomfortable truth is that excellence alone wasn't enough anymore. Mahomes was still elite, Reed was still brilliant, Kelce was still invaluable. But excellence without separation invites chaos, and chaos eventually wins. That's why this season mattered. Not because it proved the dynasty was finished, but because it proved it wasn't immune. The Chiefs didn't fall apart because they forgot how to win. They fell apart because winning finally became as hard for them as it is for everyone else. What made this Chiefs season unusual wasn't one dramatic failure, but how quietly it slipped away. Close games, thin margins, and a league that finally learned how to make Kansas City uncomfortable all added up faster than anyone expected. How the Chiefs respond now matters more than how this season ended. This offseason will show whether this was just a stumble or the start of something bigger. So, do you think this was simply a down year that got away from them? or the first real sign that the league is finally caught up? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.